We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Beis Amid Beis in Meseches Bava Basra. This is Bava Basra Daf 52b. And the previous Amid, the Gemara was discussing a case of a brother who's taking care of all of the property that's shared among the brothers. Let's say you have a situation where the father died and left a bunch of property, and there's one brother who's in charge of taking care of everything. And then there are some documents that are found, and the documents have this brother's name on it. So the brother claims that really this is totally my property. These documents belong to me. It's not shared among the other brothers. And the other brothers are saying, no, he takes care of all the property. The reason why it has his name on it is because everything has his name on it, because he's the one that's taking care of all the property. And so on this we have a machlokas between Rav and Shmuel. Which side do we believe? Rav says that this brother who's taking care of all the property, he has to bring evidence that it is his. Otherwise, we assume that it's shared property. And Shmuel says the opposite. On the contrary, it's the brothers who have to bring proof that it's a shared property because it has the name of this brother on it. So we assume that it belongs to this particular brother. And Shmuel then goes on to say that Rav would admit, he says that Abba, Rav's name was Abba, Abba would admit in a situation, let's say you have a case where this particular brother died, so now it's the Yoresh, it's the Yosem, the orphan, who is now arguing with the brothers. So there Rav would admit that the Yosem actually does win the case, and he would agree with me, meaning he would agree with Shmuel, that it's the other brothers who have to bring the evidence in this situation. And so Rav Papa then asked, how could you say that Rav admits in such a case? If the brother himself can't make the claim and win, so we're going to make a claim on behalf of the Yosem, and suddenly the Yosem is going to win the case? That's not true. We would never make a claim that goes beyond what the father himself would be able to claim and win the case. And the Gemara brought evidence to this from the case of Rava, because Rava took some property away from orphans, because there was somebody who came and claimed that the property belonged to him, and the items were items which you can't really make a chazaka on, because they're things that people lend out, things that people rent out. So just because you have possession, it doesn't really mean it's yours. And so he took it away from the orphans, because we say that their claim can't go beyond the claim of the father. Just like the father couldn't make a chazaka, so if the father dies, they also can't make a chazaka. We're not going to make a claim on their behalf that would go beyond the case that the father himself would not be able to win. And the Gemara now continues and just finishes off this idea. Kedeshalach Rav Huna bar Avin, it's like Rav Huna bar Avin sent, Devorim hasuyin lahashul lahaskir. If you have items which are generally lent out or rented out, v'yamar lekuchen hein biyadi, and a person who has possession says, it's really my property, I bought them, and nemon, he's not going to be believed, because he can't make a chazaka. The fact that he has the item in his possession is no proof at all, because this is an item that is commonly borrowed or rented out. And so therefore, again, just like the person himself can't make the claim, so let's say he dies, also his Yorish also cannot make the same claim. We're not going to make that claim on his behalf. And the Gemara indeed says, Kasha, this is actually difficult. It's difficult to understand why Shmuel says that Rav would admit to him when we're dealing with a Yosem. Why would that be true? Why should a Yosem have a stronger claim than his own father? And the Gemara continues with the two dots. Amar of Chisda says, Lo Shanu, that halacha of Rav. Again, Rav said that this brother has to bring evidence that it's his documents. Otherwise, we don't believe that it's his documents. That's only true, Ela de'ein chalukin be'isasan, that they're not even dividing the dough, meaning if it's all shared property, even the food, everything is shared, so then the brother has to bring proof that it really is his, otherwise we assume that it's shared. Aval chalukim bisasim, but if they divide the dough, meaning if there is some division, some separation of the property among the brothers, even if it's just a separation among the food, among the dough, so then already, since there was a separation, amor meisaso kimetz, we can just say that what happened is he took from some of his dough, he didn't consume all of it, he sold some of it, he did some business with some of it, etc., and he really did make his own money, and then already we can assume that these documents really do belong solely to this brother. We don't have to assume that they are shared. And the Gemara continues, Raya b'mai. So then it said again that you have to bring evidence. Again, there was a machlokas between Rav and Shmuel. Who brings the evidence? According to Rav, it's this brother. He has to bring the evidence that it's solely his. According to Shmuel, it's the other brothers that have to bring the evidence that it's shared among them. But how do you bring this evidence? What do you bring as evidence? Rabba Omar Rabba says, Raya be'edim. You bring evidence with witnesses. Witnesses have to say that they know that these documents belong, let's say, to this particular brother. Rav Shesha says, Raya b'kiyam hashtar. You can have evidence by certification of the document itself. This would be going according to the opinion of Rav, meaning according to the opinion of Rav, that the brother has to bring evidence that he is the sole owner of these documents. So if you have a kiyam hashtar, if you have a certification of the shtar, that Bezin actually certified the shtar, then already we do assume that they would have investigated and they would have found out that the name on the shtar is accurate and it solely does belong to this particular brother. And so that's the machlokas amoraim, exactly what kind of evidence needs to be brought. Amar le Rav Rav Nachman. So Rav then said to Rav Nachman, Harav v'Hashmuel. We have a machlokes Rav and Shmuel. Who needs to bring the evidence? Is it the single brother? Or is it the other brothers? And Harav of Rav Sheshes. We also have a machlokes Rav and Rav Sheshes. Let's say when the single brother is bringing the evidence, how does he bring the evidence? Does he bring Eidim or does he bring the certification of the shtar? So Mar Kaman Svirale, the master. How does the master hold with regards to this issue? In other words, Rav said to Rav Nachman, how do you Rav Nachman paskin? Amar Le said back to him, Ano Masnisa Yadani, said I know a brisa. The Tanya, as we learned in a brisa, Echad min ha'achin shayanose and v'nose besoch habayis. If one of the brothers is taking care of all of the business of the household, v'ayu onos ushtaros yotzen al shemo, and there are documents of sale and there are documents of loan that are in his name only. V'yamar shalihen, and he says that these are mine. Shenaflu li mi beis avi ima, and they fell to me. I inherited them from the house of the father of my mother, meaning this is my mother, but it's not the other brother's mother. So therefore, they belong solely to me. All of lahavi raya. So he's the one that has to bring the evidence, and so we see this brisa seems to follow, according to Rav, that he's the one, this brother is the one that has to bring the evidence. And the brisa continues, V'chein ha'isha, the same would be true by a woman. She noses v'nosenes b'soch habayis. Let's say she's taking care of everything in the house. V'ayu onos ushtaros yotzen al shemon. You have documents of sale and documents of loan that have her name on it. V'yomer shalien, and she says they're mine. Shenaflu li mi beis avi abo, mi beis avi ima, and they came to me through the house of the father of my father, or through the house of the father of my mother. So alel lahavi raya, she has to bring the evidence. Again, the same idea in accordance to Rav. The Gemara says, "My v'chein." So what is this v'chein? It seems to be the exact same halach in the brisa. Just in the first case, it was a brother, and in the second case, it was a woman. What's the difference? The Gemara answers, no, because ma'od detema, what might you have said? Isha, when it comes to a woman, kevan deshvichol amilsa. So over here, it's something that she gets praised for. The fact that she's taking care of all of their property is a point of pride for her. The Amri, because people will say about her, katarcha kamiyasmi, she's the one taking care of the orphans. So you would think there's more reason to believe that lo gazla miyasmi. There's more reason to believe that she's certainly not going to steal from the orphans, and maybe she does not need to bring evidence. Maybe we just assume that it really does belong to her. Kamash malon. So that's what the Bryce is saying. No, in this case as well, we don't just assume that it belongs to her. She does have to bring evidence that it belongs to her. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, when are all of these halachas stated? B'machzik, that's talking about a situation of chazaka, meaning, let's say, the 3-year chazaka, where you have a dispute between one person and the person who's on the property. And so we say that the person who's on the property, after a certain amount of time, let's say 3 years, he establishes a chazaka, and then we can assume that the property is indeed his. Avol benos in matana, but the Mishnah goes on to say, but let's say a person would just give a gift to someone else. Let's say you have brothers that divide a property, v'chulu, etc., meaning in cases of kinyonim, the moment you actually make a chazaka, that's a kinyan chazaka. That's a different kind of chazaka, and that chazaka creates a kinyan and makes you the owner. Essentially, the Mishnah was making a distinction between the chazaka that serves as evidence that property belongs to you, and the kind of chazaka that makes a kinyan on particular property. And the Gemara says, Atu kol hani de'amrinan. The Gemara is just questioning the phraseology of the Mishnah. In all the cases before, lav b'nei chazakin, you can't make a chazaka in the cases before. They're all cases where you make chazakas also. And the Gemara clarifies, there are words missing in the Mishnah, and it should be read as follows. What are we talking about over here when we're talking again about this idea of a chazaka of 3 years, etc.? That's talking about the chazaka that's used when there are claims and counterclaims. For example, the seller says, I never sold it to you. The buyer says that I bought it from you. They're arguing over the property. So then we talk about this chazaka that acts instead of a shtar as evidence who it belongs to. But you could also have a chazaka where there's no claim going on. It's just a chazaka which is a kinyan. Could go nosin matana. For example, a person gives a gift to somebody else. Let's say brothers divide property. Let's say you have the property of a convert. The convert has no heirs. When the convert dies, it essentially becomes ownerless property. So somebody's making a chazaka in that property. To lemikne be'almahu, that's just an idea of making a kinyan on the property. So then we say noal gadar paratz kolshu. If the person locks the property, the person fences in the property, or the person puts a little breach in the property, in any amount, harezu chazaka. That's going to be considered to be a chazaka. And the Gemara continues, Tani Rav Hoshia b'Kiddushin debei Levi. Rav Hoshia taught in the tractate Kiddushin that was learned in the yeshiva of Levi, Noal gadar paratz kolshu. If the person again locks it or fences it or breaches the fence somewhat. Befanav, if he does it in front of him, meaning he does it in front of the seller, harezu chazaka, so then the buyer has made a chazaka. The Gemara says, befanav in, shalo befanav lo, it has to be in front of the seller, and if it's not in front of the seller, it's not a chazaka. Amar Rava says, hachi kamar, this is what it means to say. Befanav, if it's in front of him, in front of the seller, lo tzarech lememar le lech chazeko kani, so then the seller doesn't need to say, go make a chazaka and acquire, because the fact that it's being done in front of the seller indicates that the seller wants this to happen, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Gimel Amud Aleph.